Well, welcome everyone. Um, this is Introduction to Buddhist Philosophy, Meditation, and Practice. And this is beginner level, kind of introductory material for general consumption. We have with us Tal, who is a beginning student who's been with me doing these sessions for quite some time and asking a lot of great questions. So hopefully this is of relevance to you, the viewer. Okay, so we have spent several weeks discussing kind of the context of Buddhist practice, the actual sort of philosophical underpinnings and the big picture and what constitutes Buddhist teachings actually. So this is, again, from the perspective and standpoint of the Tibetan tradition. I need to say that because this is a slightly different presentation of Buddhist material relative to some of the insight meditation techniques and traditions, Theravadan we call it, or even the Zen tradition. So Tibetan Buddhism is its own sort of unique system of Buddhist teachings. It's considered to be very complete, very thorough. We're going to start actually discussing meditation practice. We've not done this yet. We've been really focusing on different contemplations. Meditation is different from contemplation. But I want to say that meditation is common to pretty much most all different religious and spiritual traditions. They all have some form of meditative practice. Sometimes it has different names, like even prayer or contemplative prayer. But there's many forms and many different techniques. So this, I want to be very clear, this is Buddhist meditation techniques. This is from the Buddhist tradition, I should say. And some of these techniques are used in other schools, but this is important to emphasize at the outset, because especially in the modern supermarket of kind of spiritual shoppers, there's everything under the sun available. And I do want to emphasize that I teach pretty traditionally. I'm not making things up and just bringing stuff from my own kind of, fantasy. So I received different teachings from a specific lineage, and that's what I convey. I try to teach what I was taught, and not just what I was taught, but what I've applied from having been taught, and then my own personal experience, because at the end, that's what matters, is our internal actual experience. When we have the confidence and we know that what we are experiencing is authentic, that is what we're all after. So what makes something a Buddhist practice? I think this needs to be said. This is very important. There is actually a traditional set of criteria that are said to actually constitute a definitively Buddhist practice or understanding. And I want to say this because maybe some of you that are watching have had this experience. I know I have. I've had many people come to me over the years, even very good friends that are not necessarily Buddhist, but they read some kind of, let's say, spiritual literature, or they see something online, or some kind of new age kind of feel-good quoting, and they'll say, and they attribute it to Buddhism. They say, oh, the Buddha said, and then they say something that actually, at least in my studies and research and scholarship, the Buddha never said that. It sounds good and it feels good, and it's sort of, maybe an approximation of sort of the general kind of idea. It's hard to argue with some of these statements, but it concerns me a little bit that things are ascribed, let's say, to traditional Buddhism that really have no place there. So having said all that, I want to just say what these criteria are. The first one is that everything in this world that we perceive with our senses is impermanent. So impermanence as a overarching principle is really, really fundamental to Buddhism. There's actually four of these fundamental criteria, but we actually start with this notion of impermanence, that nothing lasts, everything comes to an end, everything falls apart. It's often traditionally said anything built up eventually will fall down, anything that is gathered together will disperse, anything born will die. So this is sort of a traditional saying. And it's a statement of objective truth, of reality. It's pretty hard to dispute this. We are encouraged to examine everything that we are told or taught or is explained to us and check it out for ourselves. This is actually fundamentally important, right? We need to see, maybe we can find some example, maybe you can find something that is not impermanent, that is eternal. See if you can. But Buddhist scholars and philosophers, and it said the Buddha himself, no one has ever found anything that is actually truly eternal. The universe itself, universes seems to be in cycles that come and go. They're born, they mature, they decay. Everything, the seasons come and go. Day turns to night, night turns back to day, and so on and so forth. So impermanence is fundamentally important. That's one criteria, that impermanence has to be sort of upheld and at least acknowledged. So we have that. Then the next notion is that in this world of duality that we inhabit and that we participate in and that we experience, everything that we grasp at, we say is of the nature of, it's a loaded word, I apologize, but it's of the nature of suffering. And suffering doesn't mean you're getting a splinter in your finger and it hurts like hell. That's not the notion of suffering here. Suffering means we don't get what we want. We certainly don't get everything we want. And even things we do get often leave a bad taste in our mouth. So, you get your new car, you think it creates some kind of happiness for you, but lo and behold, it gets dented in the parking lot. And so nothing, so this is the idea. We get what we don't want and we don't get what we do want. That's the notion. So that's also very fundamentally important. So we can't say all is bliss. Now, many people say that. Certain traditions want to say, and many people it's a feel-good kind of philosophy that people will say, all is bliss, everything is perfect. That's not exactly, let's say, a Buddhist statement. So it's not to be grim and depressed. I always say it's actually a very sobering thought. It's a very honest thought. So this is also a fundamental criteria, that anything relative is of the nature of suffering. It's inherent in it, in its own impermanence. We can actually say that impermanence and suffering are two sides of the same coin. Then the third criteria is when we look really deeply, with deep insight, which we will get to later when we're discussing more about meditation, but when we really scrutinize things, phenomena, a self, a person, oneself, when we really look deeply and we try to kind of take it apart, unpeel the layers of the onion. Is there an onion in the middle, in the center, in the core? We cannot find one. Everything is made of components and parts, which in turn themselves are made of components and parts. And if we actually take this sort of to the logical or even experiential extreme, we find out there's nobody home. There is ultimately nothing really there. It's kind of like modern physics. Everything is space, everything is energy, everything is movement. But we can't say there's really particles, there's really things there. Even atoms have, their component parts. And then they're breaking down further and further and further. And this gets into Buddhist philosophy that we're not going to talk about tonight. It's a whole vast topic. And great scholars and philosophers have talked and debated and written about this for centuries. But this notion that there's nobody home, there's ultimately what we call this doctrine of, we use the word emptiness. I like a better word, which I think is openness. But again, it's sort of part of that same coin of everything changing. If things are changing, then there's nothing permanently there. And that's the very important notion. Now, to make this practical, for a meditator, for a practitioner of Dharma, what we're really working on is, who am I? Who are you? Who is the practitioner? Who am I? What am I? It's the question that often gets unasked in the course of one's life. Seldom do people stop and actually really ask, really look, who am I? And as we're going to see, that's actually going to be the very fundamental part of Buddhist practice. Maybe the most important, maybe the ultimate part of the practice is, who am I? Because is there an I? And again, this is a big topic, and I'm going to get to meditation, don't worry, but this has to be said at the beginning, because this is the context with which meditation occurs. It's not just you get this technique to meditate and that'll take care of everything. So we need a view. So we're meditating actually with the right orientation, the correct perspective, so to speak. So we're not just blindly meditating with no real, sense of orientation or direction. So if you really look, and I can't give you the answer, it has to be your own experience, but the challenge is, can you find you? Can you find you? It's slippery, it's elusive, and maybe because it's not really there. Apparently, obviously, but this is something that we see as one of the fundamental criteria that determines whether something is authentically Buddhist or not. So right up there with impermanence, with suffering, again, a bad word. Maybe we shouldn't even use it. Let's say dissatisfaction. And then this notion, again, emptiness not being a great word, openness, something like that. We may have to create a new English word for these Sanskrit and Tibetan words. Then the fourth criteria is that there is, we say, an end, so to speak, to suffering and to confusion. And that's a state that is sometimes translated as nirvana. And that is a kind of a real thing in a sense. Really, it's the awakened state. It's the state of actual, truly liberation, liberating one's mind, liberating oneself from one's getting over oneself, this idea that I'm here. Once we have the wisdom to realize selflessness, openness, emptiness, we get to this state. So that's also a Buddhist criteria. So these are the four criteria. And if we really have these four criteria in any doctrine or any statement or any understanding or philosophical teaching, then we can say it's authentically Buddhist. It meets those parameters. It meets those four criteria. So I'm not making this up. This is in the traditional literature. So I need to say that because we're going to embark now on meditation, and it just I want to frame it within this Buddhistic context. Okay, so enough of that. So why I'm saying all this again is because every school has meditation. Every religion has meditation. Pretty much every contemplative tradition has some form of meditation. What is the point? What is the function? Why is it important? The Buddha said, don't do bad things. Do good things, cultivate good things, and train your mind. Then he said, that sums it up. That is my teaching. This is the teaching of the Buddha. The Buddha himself said that. Do good, cultivate, we use an English word, we say virtue. Be a good person, be kind, don't hurt others. So do good, cultivate your good karma, so to speak. Don't do bad things, and train your mind. So meditation is actually the mind training. And when we say that, what we really mean is let's develop good mental hygiene, good habits of the mind, strength of mind. Because let's say most people live their lives, sort of get up in the morning and go to the bathroom and brush their teeth and put on their clothes and go out the door and live their lives. And in the course of the day, there is 1,000,000,002 distractions. Every billboard and everything that comes on the radio and every random thought in your mind and every conversation. And then, of course, your cell phone rings and then you look at your social media and just on and on and on and on and on and on and on. The Buddhist path, as other traditional, authentic, contemplative paths, is about, okay, I need to develop clarity and focus. These are the best tools, the best gifts one can give oneself, clarity and focus. So instead of being jerked around by our thoughts, this is where we start to develop a form of mastery, self-control. We use words like discipline. Again, I said in a previous talk that these are words that are not necessarily popular with Westerners because we so value our freedom and the notion of I don't need to be sort of controlled. And it can lead to more suffering. So self-control, discipline, training, focus, these are the things that will actually make our mind a finely honed tool. If we're going to develop wisdom, which is actually the goal of meditation in the Buddhist perspective, it's not to get blissed out. It's not to just all is one kind of, anything like that. It's to develop true wisdom. And what is wisdom? Wisdom is that insight that actually understands, experiences, and has total confidence in realization of the fact that there's nobody home, that I don't exist the way I think I do conventionally, and the world outside myself doesn't exist the way I conventionally think it does. But there's something deeper. There's deeper insight, deeper wisdom of understanding this interdependence of all things and the impermanence, these sides of the coin, really understanding and grasping and getting the whole thing experientially. So you have to have a mind that's clear and focused. Otherwise, we're just constantly churning around, going from thought to thought, and there's no anchor. There's no home base to come back to. And there's no real sense of peace and calm in the mind. So one thing I can say is the Tibetan word for meditating is gom. Gom is probably how you would transliterate it. And it means to familiarize your mind. It means to familiarize. It means to train over and over and over. Basically, it means repetition. And what meditation will do is teach us strength of mind and clarity and focus and patience. So this is that mental hygiene aspect, very, very important. So if our mind is scattered and we are going from thought to thought, you can't get any depth. You don't really penetrate things. We have to slow down the swirl of thoughts. And by slowing down, things come into focus. So that's what we're talking about here, is divorcing ourselves from this unhealthy marriage of all these thoughts that just sweep us away. So meditation actually allows the mind and the swirl of thoughts to kind of calm down, slow down a bit, so some clarity can emerge. And then we can see more clearly how things are. So we have a word in Tibetan. It is called shine. It's the Tibetan translation of the Sanskrit word shamatha. And basically, the way the Tibetans translated this is sometimes it's translated as calm abiding. Calm abiding, abiding in calmness and peace. It's a peace meditation in the sense of not anti-war, but peace in the sense of just gentle, tranquility, calmness. So this is the starting point, is to just get the mind to calm down, slow down, soften, relax, and stay as clear and present as possible. This is what the techniques will lead us to and what we're going to talk about next.